All right, hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack, here on the show floor at DockerCon in Seattle, here with Iron.io, and here with Chad, and Chad is the co-founder of Iron.io, and Doug, who is also with Iron.io. Chad, good to see you. Chad Arimura, right? Chad Arimura, right?
Yep.
And Doug Colburn.
Good to see you again, Alex.
Good to see you. So, we were thinking about what might be a good discussion. It seems obvious, right? It's like, what is that intersection of serverless environments and containers? And, just for the people who are listening out there who may not be familiar with Iron.io, maybe you could provide us a little preface, just what it is.
Yeah, so Iron.io is a serverless infrastructure provider. So we provide a developer platform for building serverless and event-driven applications on multi-cloud environments. We run both in the cloud as a managed service as well as on-prem on top of OpenStack and Kubernetes for multi-cloud environments.
Okay. So what is the connection? So tell us what is the container connection?
Yeah, so when we founded the company in 2011, we primarily around job and batch processing, so very short-lived workloads. For example, a customer will spin up an ETL process, and they'll spin up thousands of what we were calling tasks or workers at the time. We actually used LXC, this is prior to Docker, to containerize and run on a cloud server infrastructure. When Docker came around, it was the perfect fit because it standardized the way to contain and ship code so that our customers now had a standard way to ship their workloads to us so that we can run it on any cloud infrastructure.
Why did you go with LXC in the beginning?
We needed a way to essentially containerize a workload so that we could split up a single VM and run multiple customers on that VM. So it was like one abstraction level higher than just the VM. LXC gave us the capability to be able to share memory and CPU across, say, 40 or 50 different customers that are all running their tasks at scale.
Doug, what are some of the added dimensions of this connection between containers and serverless architectures? You're talking about microservices, for example.
Yeah, so some of the good ways is because it abstracts the infrastructure from the developers, it makes it simpler for them to be able to just work, create their task or payload, and from the microservices side of things, actually create a container or a payload that does one task and does one task well. So it's moving from the monolithic application to this microservices, and this abstraction is now even further. So now the developer can focus, here's my bit of code, it does this, and its own release cycle, and now I don't even have to worry about the infrastructure, I just worry about executing something, it runs, and that Docker container gives it that ability to be able to be contained and executed in a pure state and always give a reliable kind of output.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And you hear this, I'll add to that, you hear this concept of moving the abstraction layer up. And what we started as a developer platform in 2011, LXC was our technology choice then, but what Docker is enabling us to do now is move the abstraction layer up towards the developer so that we're completely abstracting away all infrastructure beneath because they've created almost a standard around portability of workloads. So the same workload you run on Amazon, you can run on Microsoft, you can run on OpenStack, and that enables an ecosystem to thrive around moving that abstraction layer up and providing value for developers who are ultimately building and shipping software for enterprises.
How does it then correlate to the network? And how do you think about that in this context?
Well, you're definitely putting a lot of strain on the network because we're moving a lot of workloads across the network. I mean, distributed systems have been around for 30, 40 years, but now we're moving a lot more through the network itself because we're moving workloads to the cloud, we're moving it on-prem, and we're moving these between different distributed systems. The nice thing about Docker is it gives us a standard, or at least containers give us a standard way to move that over the network. So we're pushing that workload up towards the developer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so then the networking element, does that become their concern? Does it become the developer's concern, or is it a further abstraction so they don't have to?
Ideally, all abstracted away.
Yeah.
You just want to write code. Maybe you're given a certain framework to write that code in. You just want to deploy it, have it scale almost ad infinitum.
Right. So Doug, what are people coming in asking you about?
Yeah, so a lot of the things that have come up have been ETL or cron-like jobs or burst processing. I get a lot of customers, maybe it's from e-commerce, they want to know how can I get things, maybe it's getting the current UPS and FedEx and other kind of shipping things. We have Hotel Tonight like jobs where they need to be able to web scrape, and with the continually changing APIs and interfaces for websites, being able to have individual jobs that can pull and transform and load that data somewhere else, and then have individual life cycles per job, allows them to be more dynamic and be able to keep up with the constantly changing landscape for whatever type of task they're doing.
The story around Hotel Tonight is an interesting one, but also tell us about the story about Untappd as well. I keep seeing the app here, which I've used before. I'm not an avid user, but I know some people who are way into it.
Yeah, so Untappd's an interesting one. They had originally been doing kind of batch jobs every evening, and it was giving a poor user experience because the relation from when you checked in to when something actually appeared was quite far away. So then they moved to more of a microservices type, but it was actually serialized in one application. And so it worked when they had a small handful of users, but as more people drank with their app and liked it, they would start overloading their servers, so they needed to move to a different method. They moved to that method using IronMQ and IronWorker. IronMQ to regulate the load or the number of jobs that needed to be executed, and then IronWorker to be able to pull those jobs and actually have it asynchronous. So in your check-in process, I can check in, have an immediate response, but then in the background have and go the other details run and then processed and then put in, so that when people go and look at whether it's the reviews or information about the beer, that can happen without interfering with the user experience.
Our mantra is developer empowerment, and Untappd is almost the perfect embodiment of developer empowerment. If you can believe it, for the first couple of years and still today, it's really only a couple developers. In fact, when they first started working with Iron, it was only a single developer that built the app up into hundreds of thousands of beer check-ins per night, which is incredibly impressive for a single developer to build and ship software that can scale to hundreds of thousands of users with no developers. And here's the catch. Here's the best part. He was working part-time on the app. So this idea or this notion of serverless future is really powerful.
So workerless kind of thing too, like you can make your work less, you can keep another job.
Work less with Ironworker. Yeah, I like that.
There you go.
I like that.
You know, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, you're an ideas guy, Alex.
So I guess my question is, for a company like Untappd, there's still a lot of complexity there. Like every user has an identity, you know, every user has a history, every user has their own graph. There's all kinds of different, you know, aspects to the platform itself. And I think sometimes we're confusing what we think about serverless and just thinking like how simple it is. What is the work on, what does the other side of the fence look like for Untappd and kind of connecting all these different kind of services into this environment?
Yeah, so because of the event-driven model, it allows, if they do have a web server, which they do, so that they can actually load things. They have the mobile app, which has a lot of functions, and there's also a back-end type of thing like databases. But what this allows is it can be event-driven from the mobile app. So you go to do a check-in, that can hit a simple URL for Ironworker, or it will be pulling from the message queuing system automatically. And all that happens is that you pass some very simple parameters that allows these workers to go, connect to the database, load up information, and then from the front-end side, all you're doing is pulling the collected information. I don't need to worry about doing a whole bunch of jobs serially and overloading anything, just very small one-time jobs.
Yeah, and the modern enterprise stack that we call it, the new stack, if you will, is forming, and that's what's great about this thriving ecosystem is a developer or a team of developers can now choose a set of technologies that get them to this serverless world. So obviously data storage is a huge part of any application and a necessary requirement. So things like Amazon DynamoDB is the example of almost a serverless data storage layer. Untappd specifically was using MongoDB from Object Rocket at Rackspace, now Rackspace company. So the data layer was handled by Object Rocket, and the developer API, event-driven services were handled by Iron.io, and then the server layer for the presentation app was handled by Rackspace themselves, so Rackspace Cloud Servers or something.
You guys, thank you very much for taking some time to talk here at DockerCon. Always good to catch up with you, Chad, and nice to talk with you, Doug, and we'll be in touch real soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, good talking to you, Alex.